All right. Good morning, everyone. Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Howard Walper. I'm CEO Americas of Commodities People. In today's webinar, AI at the Tipping Point is being hosted by our friends at ClearDocs. ClearDocs empowers commodity organizations to automate data-intensive processes, reducing risk and boosting efficiency with AI-driven insights. So to learn a little bit more about what they do, please visit their website at cleardocs.com. So I'm very honored today to have been asked to host this webinar. So a big thank you to my friends at ClearDocs for making this event possible. Last year, we were saying that AI is the future of the commodity trading industry, and this year we can safely say I think it's the present. In trading shops around the world, AI is being incorporated into business processes, driving efficiency, eliminating manual errors, giving teams deeper and more instantaneous insight into areas of operation. It's proving so efficient that groups who've not yet embarked on their AI journey might find themselves at a bit of a disadvantage. They're facing a higher paced market, a faster paced market, tighter competition, and potentially leaving themselves open to risks. So we'll get into this in just one moment. But before we get started, let's see. I think we've got quite a few people on already. I'd love to take a couple polls in just a minute, but before we get started, let's do a little bit of housekeeping points here. I'd like to encourage anybody who is watching from their offices to ask questions throughout the webinar using the Zoom Q&A box. Please use the Q&A box, not the chat box. We'll do our best to address as many questions as possible. We'll also be running interactive polls throughout the webinar. So your participation is really highly encouraged. It helps steer this conversation. In fact, before I introduce the speakers, I'd like to take a couple quick polls of the audience to see where everybody sort of is in their AI journey. So let's bring up poll question number one. Where is your organization today on its AI adoption journey? So all you need to do if you're watching is to check one of those points, and let's see what comes up. Encourage everybody to take a quick minute and participate in the poll. All right, now that we've given it a couple seconds, let's see where that came through. All right, so you can see most people are just starting to explore use cases. Some are piloting AI in specific areas, so that's probably the next biggest batch. Scaling across all departments, definitely much lower. Fully integrated, even lower than that. No plans to adopt. So we do have a pretty wide range, but most people seem just starting to touch into this. Let's ask one more poll question. Within your organization, what's your biggest barrier to the adoption of AI? All right, let's see what we'll give it a couple more seconds, and then we'll see where the results came in. All right, let's see where the results are. Okay, so lack of clear business case. The biggest one is the skills and talent gap. That's a really interesting point. The people, it definitely is a people issue. Let's do the last poll real quick. What is your what is the primary objective of your organization in achieving in using an AI process? So the folks who are actually in the process of working with AI, let's see what you have to say. All right, let's see where that poll result came in. Improve operational efficiency, reducing normal tasks is way up in the lead. So that actually fits in very well with some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. So with that, let us introduce our speakers for this morning. We've got a great panel. Why don't I go around the table here and let everybody give themselves a little bit of an introduction. First, we have Nate Branscombe from 61 Commodities. Nate, welcome. I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Howard. Appreciate you having me. Nate Branscombe, COO, 61 Commodities. We're a global energy trader in physical and financial markets. And as I can see from the polls, like a lot of you, we're kind of navigating and trying to find the optimal way to use AI in our processes. So looking forward to giving you some perspective on how we're doing that and learn a bit from Katie and Michelle as well.
Wonderful. And with that, how about why don't we introduce Michelle Bruce from Optimus?
All right. Good morning. Thanks so much for having me. We're excited to be here. I'm Michelle Bruce, partner at Optimus. Optimus, we do recruiting and staff and solutions for the commodities trading and marketing industry, if you will. And my background is much around that, having been at Enron, AEP, Merrill Lynch, and most recently Barclays, where I was over global commodity operations. So excited to be here, and I think this topic is very apropos.
Wonderful, and welcome. Welcome, Michelle. Thank you. And
Thank you.
Last but not least, our friend from ClearDocs, Katie Carter. Katie.
Hi. Hi, good morning. Thanks, Howard. Thanks, Nate and Michelle and everyone who's joined today. I'm Katie Carter. I'm the head of product at ClearDocs. And as you're going to learn today, we're really focused on bringing together, business-focused solutions to the commodity and energy industry. I myself have been working in this industry for over 20 years, both within trading organizations and solution providers. And really the through line through all of that is looking at ways to, mitigate risks and improve operational efficiencies. And so I'm excited for the conversation today.
Same here. Thank you again for hosting this today and for putting together this conversation. Maybe the question should start with Nate. I know you're working on quite a few things. Nate, what was your incentive to begin exploring AI solutions? And I guess what were some of the warning signs that showed that inaction on an AI had become the sort of the greatest risk?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Howard. So I think the first thing I think about is a lot of our employees had these positive personal interactions with AI, mostly through the chatbots, right? So whether it be, at home, if you're looking at personal finance questions or recipes, whatever it might be, or if you take it into work and it's helping you, find the perfect Excel formula or ideas for presentations. People were realizing that this is a really powerful tool, and it sparked curiosity to say, what can we do to leverage that on the business side? So we started from a good foundation of people being excited about what to do there. And then secondly, when you're talking about operations, people know that the processes they're going through are not always optimal, right? If you're getting a stack full of emails and you're opening each Adobe invoice, saving it to a file, you don't sit back and say, I've reached the pinnacle of efficiency, right? So our folks were well aware that there was opportunities out there and excited to implement them. So we had the opportunity in that case too. And the final thing I'll note is that we saw it more and more when you're talking to candidates, whether they're junior or senior. People want to know what we're doing in AI, because we'll talk about it a lot today. It's interesting, it wasn't one of the poll questions, but one of the goals for AI for us is to have people doing kind of the most value add, the most, creative or rewarding thing that they can do in their position, and taking out the more manual or clerical pieces. So when we're talking to people and they're asking about that, we want to be at the forefront and do the best we can to be at the forefront of what's happening.
Though it was interesting to point out in the polls that one of the things that people noticed as their biggest obstacle to AI adoption was the people and staffing, which is interesting. So it is interesting that people looking for jobs are asking about your AI experience.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Michelle, what sort of, I guess, risk buckets have your clients been uncovering as they started integrating AI-powered tools into their operations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that we all recognize, and the industry certainly recognizes, that AI is definitely an accelerator. The risks you have, if go unchecked, there are quite a few risk buckets that you can, quantify and qualify those the risk around AI. So we kind of look at it, I'd say roughly 6 buckets, but you've got kind of your strategic and competitive bucket. If you're not engaging, you're automatically taking risk and not being involved, right? And moving forward with aspects of AI. And so perhaps missed opportunities, talent gaps. You don't have the resources that want to be there because you're not engaged, and then you can fall behind your peers. The other thing I would say is really around operational risk. not being, involved with AI, you're losing some efficiencies there. Not being fully integrated as perhaps you would want to be. Just various things around the whole operational risk piece. The other item that we really see is around data and being able to protect your data, so data privacy issues and making sure that you have the governance program around that and using AI, particularly if you're involving third-party vendors, which there's pros and cons around that, but you certainly have to think about your own data and maintaining that security around that. Obviously, you have some legal and compliance issues. There's regulation out there and need to be on top of that and what all that would mean. Security, thinking about data leaks. And then a big one is really human and cultural risk. And kind of back to Nate's point, because we also have a recruiting side of our business, we are doing lots of recruiting for, more around AI and data scientists and machine learning type expertise. And we do see where candidates also don't want to go to an organization that may be behind and may not be as innovative. So you could certainly, run that risk of not appearing innovative to the market or to potential new candidates.
Excellent. Thanks, Michelle. Actually, I think that leads to maybe some to one of your points, which is, what are some examples where you found that the delaying of automation created, I guess, not just a competitive lag, but real exposure, either financially, operationally, or reputationally for one of your clients?
Yeah, Howard, we see a lot of that. And fundamentally delaying automation leaves a company to rely more on manual processes, which are governed by operational controls, which is really important. But like we've discussed, it can be very resource and time intensive. It can be error prone. There's natural limits on, how much manual processing can perform. And so those are really, the issues with delaying automation, but how do they play out in real world examples? We have a series of intelligent applications. Each one focuses on really specific business processes. So I'll try to touch on a couple different ones. Within the trade confirmation application, you see trade entry errors, you see trades entered late, you see, missing trades. And what's the impact of that time lag, right? If you're not automating that process, if you have a hedging strategy and the market is volatile, finding an error in days rather than hours is really impactful financially. And so that's, a common experience that we hear. We also, with the introduction of large language models and generative AI into sort of our co-pilot experience, we see, the introduction of language, or at least specific language into contracts, which can and do introduce risks, can change, shift who pays for certain operational costs and things like that. And so, that can have an impact to the bottom line. And certainly if you know about it, you may not agree with it, or you could just simply negotiate. And so it opens up a line of communication that can be proactive and commercially responsible. The big area for us is operational intelligence. So every time we're getting information around the physical operations, whether that be dates like bill of lading dates, quantities, load discharge quantities, the throughput of that information into your system of risk is really time sensitive. So again, the delaying and automation can have the same impact to your P&L, your position. And one sort of like fun anecdote that we hear from a customer is the data that they get that they weren't necessarily looking for that reveals something, impactful to their business. So one customer looking at, a vast array of trucking invoices, not really having the ability to process the scale of volume they were receiving, were able to process the invoices more seamlessly. But in addition to that, we're able to see, which vendors were performing, which truck drivers may be causing more delays. And with that sort of secondary information and insight could drive, good relationship conversations with the vendor.
That is really really interesting, and it just shows how much more focus can be placed on the business when they're not when you don't have to worry about
Yeah, when
the
you're not just crunching
manual
numbers.
process. Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So at this point, let's ask one more question of the audience. What do you see as the greatest risk of delaying AI adoption in commodity trading operations? So let's see what the audience says about where they feel some of the risks are, and we will give them just a moment to respond. And I would like to remind everybody that if you have any questions or anything like that, please put it into the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many of those questions as we can. All right, let's see what the answers were here. All right, the greatest risks. Okay, loss of efficiency is a big one, but falling behind, strategic drift. I think it's very interesting that a lot of people do see that as one of the greatest risks to delay adoption of AI at the moment. All right, well, let's move on to the next question. So let's talk about rolling out AI within an organization. So once you do make that decision to adopt an AI process into your AI into your processes, how do you bring some of the different stakeholders, maybe from compliance, from risk, from IT, other teams, into the journey so that governance and governance and trust aren't an afterthought? So maybe Nate, that might be a good one for you to start with, but of course anyone can jump in.
Sure, yeah. So I think one thing we try to do is frame it up as a process project rather than a technical change or technical evolution. Uh, Everybody at a commodity trading shop is going to have gone through like a CTRM upgrade or implementation, and that's associated with fear and pain, right? So we don't want it to be something like that. We want to frame it as a tool, something that can supplement what you do today and make your life better. So from that standpoint, process, it's business process, it's not technical, in its true sense. So also, this is something that's different in all places, but we framed it as an opportunity and not a mandate. So I know some places say you better adopt AI or you're out the door. That's not the way we think of it here. It's again, it's an opportunity that you can leverage and take advantage of. And in that sense, along those same lines, we try this to start small or think about the small along with the big. We at first we thought we'd just get into a room and say, "What's all right, AI? It's going to transform us. What's it going to do? What's the big bang that's going to make us 50% more efficient right away?" And it's hard to find those, but it's not as hard when you think about kind of smaller, more actionable things that you can do. Whether it's making data available through a chatbot that looks in your internal data, having it help you with if you don't like putting together PowerPoints, have it help you with your PowerPoints. All these little steps that when you put them all together, they can make a big difference overall. And we're a customer of ClearDocs. Obviously, if you keep the message very simple, it hits home faster, right? ClearDocs for us, the message was it's going to take our invoices, it's going to digitize them automatically, it's going to compare that and reconcile it automatically to our CTRM data. That's pretty simple and easy to understand, and the return on that is very clear right from the get-go. So put those all together, that's kind of the standpoint we use to bring people in and get them on board.
That's very just curious if Katie or Michelle, if you have anything to weigh in, how you see that with your customers.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk to sort of how we approach supporting that adoption. And I would just say it starts very early in the process as we get to know our prospects. And the real critical piece to it is making sure there's a clear business problem to solve. So whether you use AI technology or another technology, you have to be clear about what your objectives are and identify an issue, a problem, a gap, a knowledge gap, resource gap, whatever it might be, and then determine, that there's a good solution fit there. And then second to that, the AI actually provides a superior solution to some of the other technologies that you may be available. So I think really understanding the pain points of an organization is critical to that adoption. And then I would say where we would like to be ideally is always being able to point to a certain, KPI that we can tie back to. So we always want to test that adoption is meeting its objectives, right? It is having the impact we want it to have. And so identifying those things early in the process tends to create a smoother pipeline to adoption. And users can then see the value in what they're using. And I think to me, as a product, it always comes back to, the user and the user experience.
Thank you. And maybe, Michelle, you might be able to answer this one. When sort of cultural hesitations stall adoption, how do these perhaps translate into reputational damage and sort of the perception of loss, the perception of not keeping up with innovation?
Yeah, I think that goes back to the human and cultural risk, right? So it could be perceived both internally and externally that you're not being innovative, back to the point of not being, from an internal perspective, not being able to hire and keep good talent because you're not being innovative and moving forward and progressing, which is a big risk to the organization. Difficult to attract talent at times, and then missing out on the efficiency gains that both Nate and Katie are talking about. So that's really big internally. And then externally, you could have market reputational risk, right? Because your clients, customers, the industry in general may be viewing you as not being innovative, and not moving the ball forward, as well as missing that competitive advantage, that you could get. I think the thing that needs to be really remembered as an organization goes down the path of using AI and looking at how they're going to utilize it to their most advantage, is to be very purposeful, understand what they're really trying to target, what goal are you trying to get to, and what does that real ROI look like, and just being very purposefully intentful about it all.
And how do you think once the decision is made, how do you think a company should weigh building maybe AI internally and sort of ramping up for that versus partnering with vendors?
So I think Nate touched on it a little bit. Everybody, or all of us here, have probably gone through an CTRM, ETRM implementation, and that's always the question. Do I go internal or do I go external? And again, I think the deciding factor one needs to think about, am I looking at this as what I'm trying to build, something that's my competitive advantage, and I really kind of need to keep it close to the vest, and that's a really important thing, or is it kind of a utility program and everybody has the same thing, but I'm just trying to get some more efficiency out of the same process that happens in a trade life cycle that everyone does. And then if you look internally and externally on which path you take, there's pros and cons to each, obviously. So if you just try to build it internally, the pros are certainly that you own all of that IP, you get to customize it the way that you want to customize it. You've got your staff on board and there's no knowledge transfer. They're kind of doing it all. But then there's also some cons to that, is back to that talent gap. Am I able to hire? It can be expensive. Am I able to hire the right resources to do that? If I have them internally, are they really gaining the experience and the expertise where they're being able to aggregate from seeing a multitude of clients or counterparties in the industry trying to do the same thing and learning from that, versus just focused on their internal piece? So that's the internal, if you just want 100% internal. If you look external, then you're really handing over, there's data privacy issues. While the vendor is getting to build something for you, they also may not take the IP, but they take the knowledge that they've done that, and they're able to go, share that with other activities that they do, or projects that they do. But the pros to having an external are obviously that you're not having to go build that bench and hire people in, and it could be less expensive in the long run, and you just have someone to support it. I think what we see is, again, thinking about what's the strategic goal. Is it a something that's my competitive advantage or just a utility program? And then maybe how do you make that mix between having your internal resources to do it and develop it along with the support from a vendor supplying some of that?
Great. Well, thank you for that. Let's go back to Nate, and after the implementation, after all is said and done, what are some of the early benefits that you're already seeing? And I guess what are the benefits you're seeing, and what do you think companies who haven't started their adoption yet? What are some of the risks that will compound for firms like that in the next maybe 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, so certainly, efficiency gains, number one thing that pops out when you look at what the process looked like before and after. It's pretty night and day, and you can um, by doing that, and the people that are operating these new functions and systems, the ideas start to bubble out, say, hey, that worked for this. I bet it could work for that, and that happens both within the organizations that's using it, and some of the organizations. We're at a size where there's a lot of visibility to whatever's happening. So it doesn't have to be necessarily, for instance, the invoicing folks who are realizing other gains. There's people, say, hey, I'm pouring through documents a lot of day. Maybe AI could, whittle that down and help me focus on the ones that I should be focusing on. So I'd say the two biggest things that pop into my head, number one is the efficiency gains. And number two, the idea generation that comes from that. And there's also a lot of improved data that we get, being able to do metrics around what we're getting out of the process now. That was available before, but it's much easier to do when you can focus and use kind of data that's coming out of the AI process.
Excellent. Well, at this point, let's do one more poll. Let's see what the audience thinks about this. Audience, what do you think is the biggest? What do you see as the biggest challenge to successful AI implementation across the commodity trading life cycle? What's the biggest challenge to a successful implementation? So let's give the audience a chance to weigh in here. Now, someone pointed out that in the Q&A that there's a bit of a bias in some of the questions. Obviously, if people are joining this webinar, they're exploring getting into their AI journey now. So that's fine. It's just we want to have a good feel for where the audience is, so that we're providing the best information possible. Why don't we see what the answers are here? What do you see as the biggest challenges to successful AI implementation? Yes, so it looks like driving adoption and overcoming cultural hesitations seems to be the biggest bucket, though it's pretty evenly split throughout the different options. So that is a very interesting response. All right, well, let's get back to our panel. Nate, based on your experience to date, how are you going to be identifying and evaluating future projects? Has the current work that you've already done helped you identify what your next steps are?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, Michelle and Katie put this very well. So I'm probably just going to be reinforcing the way they put it, but we break things out into things where we're looking for a competitive advantage, and that's trading research, price prediction, that sort of thing, and to ones where we're not, frankly. So invoicing, confirmations, exchange reconciliations. We'd love to benefit from information that other folks have, and frankly, if people get better at it, it's going to make our life easier too. So number one, make that differentiation, and then decide, vendor versus internal. Certainly, if you're not looking for a competitive advantage, it leans much more to using the vendors, benefiting from their support, from their experience. We find that with ClearDocs, we very often during the implementation would say, they'd ask us questions, we'd say, well, what do you find to be the most successful with your other clients? And that really helps us get over the wall of maybe kind of understanding a little bit better how best to use these tools. I'd say the other piece is we're at a really lucky stage in our development, I'd say. 61C personally, that we're you know, where we can build to scale, right? So we're not looking for AI to replace or take away any positions. We're looking to build a foundation that will allow us to scale more easily.
Mhm.
So that's the targeted areas that we're looking for. How can we give tools to people to help them do their job better? And as volume increases, we don't have to increase headcount, and we're actually doing the more value add thing that people enjoy doing more and get more fulfillment and reward from doing. And that, so taking that all together, that allows us as a company to focus more on domain knowledge when we're talking about our own people and
Mhm.
our candidates that we're looking for. Um, we see ourselves certainly as a, commodity trading business that uses technology. We're not a technology company that trades. So it's kind of reinforced our commitment to look for folks that are, you know, thinking differently and thinking hard about commodity markets rather than having to force us to look for too much of a technology bend and then teach them the commodity side.
So it actually sounds like this next question. It sounds like you've answered it to a degree. A question from the audience in terms of adoption: did you experience any resistance or fear by your team when the tool delivered what it what it what it promised? You,
Yeah.
did the
No,
efficiency scare anyone?
no, I don't think so. No, again, we're at a point where people are glad to have a little bit of that, manual work. We talk about saving documents and renaming files and putting them here and there. That stuff was just eliminated, and you can focus on where you have issues, attacking those issues, reducing them the next time, whittling them down. So it's been well adopted here, both in the ClearDoc sense and other areas we've used it.
Wonderful. And Michelle, maybe 2 to 3 years from now, how do you think Inaction reshapes a company's ability to operate or innovate in the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, technology is moving really, really fast, right? And we all have lots of data to deal with, lots of room for. There is, naturally much inefficiency just dealing with data and dealing with processes. So I think if you don't start to adopt or look to adopt, then you're going to have some really key impacts. One, I think we've talked about this some, but around the innovative impacts. So you're potentially going to fall behind your peers. You're going to be behind the curve. It's going to take time to catch up. It's kind of, compounding interest. If you don't start early, it just takes you that much longer to fill the gap. The other thing is really around your growth impacts. Back to the point of it being more difficult to hire really strong staff because they want to be with a company that is innovative and progressing and moving forward and room to learn. You also could be at a cost disadvantage because you haven't gained some of the efficiencies that your competitors are gaining through AI and the efficiencies that brings. And then, potential missed revenue opportunities because you're not having all the data and the ability to do the analysis and trending and identify those key areas where you could, be a market maker just because you don't have access to the clear path forward with some potential opportunities. I would say there's also just a long-term risk that, again, is compounding if you're not moving forward. And then I think we talked about earlier, really kind of the reputational risk there, both with your clients and, and counterparties in the industry that you're not being innovative. So it could impact your brand.
Excellent. And I do have one more question for the panel, but before I go into that question, just maybe a few more summary polls just to see what the audience is coming away with. So after today's discussion, has your view of AI adoption across commodity trading ecosystem, has it changed? Does it? How do you feel about AI after today? Let's see what the audience says. How has your view changed on AI adoption across the commodity trading ecosystem? Let's see what the poll says. It feels more urgent. Yeah, about 33% there do, and some see more opportunities than they initially considered. So it does seem that a lot of people are really looking into and exploring AI adoption. Let's ask the next poll. What do you believe should be the top priority for firms adopting AI in the next 12 months? So is it building the internal skills, partnering with the right vendors, embedding governance and compliance early, driving cultural change and adoption, or providing quick ROI wins? Let's flash that card, see what it says. Building internal skills and expertise. That's very interesting. That is very interesting. People are stuck. Okay, sounds good. Do we want to update that? Getting a message from from our operator. Give people a couple more seconds. Do you want to run that answer one more time? All right. Well, yeah. So it seems to be lining up just about the same. So let's move on to the last poll, which is, how confident are you that your organization is ready to act on AI adoption? By the way, to the panelists, I find these polling questions very interesting. It does look like people are really thinking about this, really considering what their strategy is going to be, and that they seem to be looking for information like this on how different companies uh, are adopting it into their system. In just a minute, we'll be asking sort of your pieces of advice for these folks in the audience. So that'll be coming up. But let's run those poll results. Very confident. We're already moving. That's good to see. Somewhat confident preparing now. So it looks like most people are starting to make that move. And of course, selecting the right people to work with and the right partners is always important. So of course if you'd like to speak to the folks over at ClearDocs, please do reach out. I'm sure they would love to chat with you. All right, let's move on to our final question from our final prepared question with the audience. What advice would you give to leaders who know that they're at the tipping point but still hesitating a bit? So let's go around the table. Who wants to jump in on that first?
I'll jump in. Thanks, Howard.
All right.
I think there's two things that come to mind. One, I would say, if you're in that cohort where you're hesitant, start small, right? Find a project with an appropriate risk appetite for your organization, and consider that, like I mentioned before, defining what are your objectives, what do you want to get out of the project, so that you can really clearly evaluate it at the end. Because your decision to move forward with something bigger will weigh heavily on the results of this small project. And I would say another benefit to approaching it that way, and I think we've seen this and presented in different ways today, whether there's a knowledge gap or a talent gap or a desire to bring in, and retain, folks who are knowledgeable in this space. This is an enormously valuable learning curve if you are, at that tipping point. What you'll learn from taking on a small project will really help you guide strategy in your organization. So that was the first thing, to start small. And then I would say, talk to a lot of people, talk to peers in your industry, vendors, of course. But what I've found is most people are really want to share what they've learned and are really looking to, create sort of a virtuous cycle of communication. So typically talking to people, you're gonna get some great insights.
Wonderful. Michelle, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I second exactly what Katie said. Start small, but start now. I think that's super, super important. Back to what we had said earlier, kind of inaction is taking on a risk and not moving yourself forward, but also supporting what Katie has just said around, determining what your strategic goal is, being very, very clear around what that governance structure looks like, and yeah, get started, set that goal, and figure out the best way to do that without implementing or pulling in any overarching operational risk and disrupting your internal controls.
Excellent. Thanks, Michelle. And finally, Nate, last word on that topic.
Sure, yeah, agree with Michelle and Katie. Great answers. I'd echo, use your network, talk to other people. I bet a lot of people hope they could tune into this webinar and there would be a list of here's the 10 things you need to do, and it's gonna transform your organization, right? But it's harder than that. It's different for everybody. But by talking to people you know and trust who have gone through things, you get some great ideas. And the other one is, find a vendor. It can be very helpful. It was very helpful for us as an entry point. It unlocks a lot of different ideas that you might not have known before, and you get the benefit of the exposure that they have to a lot of other clients and ideas that those clients are having. So it can be a good entry point.
Well, thank you very much for that. And with that, I think we've got a lot of questions coming in from the audience. So without further ado, I'm going to kick into those if that's okay with everybody. Here's one. How can corporate AI users train AI to the needs of the company or profession? Should training people be even more essential? So I think the question is more about how do you train the people in your shop to use the AI that your company has rolled out, or the processes, AI-driven processes.
So Howard, I can.
Please, Katie, go ahead.
Yeah, I can sort of approach this from a couple. I think I'm interpreting this question of how are we going to validate the results of AI if we lose a certain amount of semantic knowledge, industry knowledge amongst our folks. And so would training be even more essential? And I think absolutely yes. And I think it's really important when you are considering adopting AI. It's a lot of what Nate has said. It's elevating the folks in your organization to do more meaningful tasks, deepen their domain expertise, do more value add tasks. So certainly, I think that creates an opportunity to do that. But making sure that whatever solutions you're using, there's an appropriate audibility, explainability, human in the loop feedback between what your AI may be providing you from insights and where you, the domain expertise, the human user, has the ability to, move things through gate posts at an appropriate risk level, I would say. So I hope that answers the question from one perspective.
It was a pretty broad question, so I think that was actually a very good answer. Here's another one from the audience. I guess in the course of all of your experience, what are some of the use cases that you found to be the most impactful as a way to selling projects to senior management or stakeholders? What sort of projects I guess really move the needle there? Yeah.
I can take that one from an example with some of our clients. We've got a tool that helps to integrate for natural gas, integrate the nominations and then the actualization back with the EBBs. And while the tool takes the data and inserts the nom to the EBB and brings it back, obviously you've got contracts. You could have a counterparty with the where you have multiple contracts, and we are using AI to help learn on that when the data is coming back and you have exception failures. that the AI is learning from that and helping to redirect so that you're not, slowly but surely you're getting less and less failures. And so that's been really, really helpful for clients on many fronts, especially, just the key point of getting reduction from a scheduler having to do all of that work. Now they can go do more of the analytics or deal with their peers in the market and do more of the customer facing activities versus really having to focus on the internal activities.
Gotcha.
That is one example.
Excellent. Here's another one. Katie, you had talked about some of the identified risks. Looking across clients, and of course, anyone feel free to jump in here, but looking across clients, what's the sort of most consistent area of risk you found across different organizations?
Yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, it's hands down, it's the operational risk that impacts your financial exposure. So what is happening in this industry where we're talking about commodities and energies, and there's a physical component to the nature of the transaction, that operational risk that involves information coming from many different sources that needs to be validated and consumed for appropriate financial risk management stands out across the board for all of our clients and all of our use cases. And, the solutions to date have focused, I'd say, more in that front office risk management ecosystem. And so I think naturally we do see that's the operational risks that need to be serviced with automation.
Excellent. Do any of your Nate, how does this sort of line up with some of your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are the risks we were focusing on when we started talking to ClearDocs, when we think about it in other areas as well. We talked a lot, probably about all of them already, but there's obviously the risk of not being at the forefront or missing out on some candidates that want this kind of leadership to be shown. It's pretty good natural selection, right? If you want people that are wanting to do the parts of the job that are more creative and more difficult, but at the same time more rewarding, it's a good way to kind of weed that out. So yeah, all of our experiences pretty much lined up with the way that Michelle and Katie have framed it up.
Excellent. One of the common concerns I hear about AI implementation in general is around data, either access to the data, quality, governance of the data. When considering your AI project, what are some of the primary steps in addressing the challenges around data?
Yeah, I'll
Who wants
say
to jump?
briefly on my part, because one of the benefits to ClearDocs was that it takes unstructured data, right? It takes client data that's coming in, and every invoice looks different, every confirmation looks different. Another good reason to rely on maybe a vendor in that circumstance. When you're working on internal stuff and internal data, it's kind of a fortunate byproduct. It really makes you get your house in order, right? And businesses like ours are going to grow and expand and take on other businesses with new databases. And at the end, you look at a patchwork of CTRMs and databases and sources and uses of data. So one thing you kind of have to do or forced to do is build that layer that's going to structure your data and make it and put it in a format that's going to be usable for AI. So for us, that's another project. It's another project we're undergoing, and it forced our hand, which is kind of a good thing in a way.
And any other thoughts on that from Michelle or Katie?
Yeah,
About
I mean,
data?
I agree really fundamentally with the point that Nate just made, that one of the bigger risks strategically of not adopting it is that an AI project will naturally drive an organization towards getting clean data and connecting to data sources.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really interesting to hear you say that as well, because that's I think one of the disadvantages of not doing it. And then in terms of how do you address the data challenge, to a certain extent, is how you would address data governance, security, all the things you need to do, data normalization, storage, access controls. Those are pretty consistent across technology projects. I think what gets introduced with AI in data is kind of the point I was making before of ensuring that there is, feedback loops, auditability, explainability to this new generated data that you're getting. And so I would consider that like operationally having control over the data, in addition to some of the other things you would do with any technology project and your company's secure data.
Excellent. Michelle, anything to throw in here? Are you?
Yeah,
Excellent.
I think that both Katie and Nate really covered it. You know, data is your biggest asset in an organization. It's probably your biggest challenge. Back to Nate's point that they had to really get the house in order, and we see that all the time. I do have a client that we worked with, ClearDocs, to help bring in a bunch of data and help solve a really big problem. It's all about that data management and understanding how you're going to govern it and utilize it.
Excellent. We have a few more questions, and funny that they all seem to deal with the human element of AI implementations. I guess let maybe try to summarize them all. Again, you're addressing the sort of concern around it, training, onboarding. Are there any final thoughts you have in making your human teams and your AI processes work best together? Any sort of closing thoughts on that?
I would just say, maybe a little pie in the sky, but if it's a mandate, it's harder to adopt. If it's something that's generated from the users, it's much easier to adopt. So if there's a way to do that in your organization to kind of make it an opportunity, give people some freedom to interact with it, play with it, figure out some ways that'll help them, bring those people back together to share those stories, those kind of ideas, if those bloom up and become the things that you want to focus on, people own it. It was their idea, they move it forward. If it's somebody else's idea that's being kind of felt like it's shoved down their throat, adoption is going to be much harder. So not always possible, but ideal if you can do it.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think to further that, one thing we haven't talked about exactly yet, but I think is applicable to this question, which is that yes, we want to make sure we're always getting back to a business problem, and that there is a certain friction in the user experience that needs to be addressed. But AI is really just a component of a solution. It's not a standalone solution. So the application is about the user experience, and it should remove friction and delays and manage risks with that automation, and automate the business process, and just understanding that AI is really just one component of a holistic solution. And I think driving the narrative, with that perspective can be helpful.
Great. And Michelle?
Yeah, 100% agree. Change is hard. I think you find, and you probably see, especially with all the data that do come through our shops, a lot of people are so, immersed in just trying to run through the task and get things in order, and they're spending so much time not doing the job that they really should be doing, which is more around data analytics. So I think utilizing and embracing AI tools so that it helps provide some efficiency, where you're not having to do all of that manual manipulation just to get to where you really want to be, which is being empowered to do the analytics, work with commercial, help grow the business, because you're able to do the analytics and provide some insight and some growth potential by doing that part of your job, and not just the quagmire of dealing with trying to get data formatted, for example. So I agree 100% with both Nate and Katie.
Well, wonderful. And that'll have to be the last word on the subject. If we were up on a stage at a conference, I'd ask the audience for a round of applause for our panelists. Since we're all sitting in front of screens, let's have a virtual round of applause for Nate, Michelle, and Katie for spending some time with us this morning and answering some of these pressing questions. So thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of today's discussion. So again, a huge thank you to all the panelists for sharing your expertise, and thanks to all of you for joining us here today with such great questions. Special thanks to our hosts from ClearDocs. And again, if you want to find out a little bit more about what they do, I believe we're putting their URL up in the chat. You can reach out directly to them and visit their website at www.cleardocs.com. And finally, thank you for joining us from wherever you are around the world. Thanks for spending some time with us today. We hope you found it interesting. I hope you found it informative, and that you've come away with some new insights that'll help you really grow your business and thrive in today's marketplace. So wherever you are, once again, thank you for joining us, and everybody, have a great day.
Thanks, Howard.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.